What's up, guys? Gun here. Happy Sunday, November 29th, 2020. It's NFL Week 12 on DraftKings and FanDuel. I'm glad you guys could squeeze me in. I'm going to try to be short, sweet, to the punch with this late content. The benefits, as you guys know, late content, more up-to-date, accurate news, and boy, was there quite a bit of news Friday and Saturday. Before we get into the content, I want to remind you guys that if you guys want access to my game notes, my projections, my ownership projections, my spreadsheets, all that good stuff, as usual, rundfs.com. Get yourself a VIP pass. Now more than ever, VIP is the highest discounted rate it's ever been. It's just $15 for the week. Essentially just because there's just NFL right now. However, it does unlock access to the 24/7 rundfs.com VIP Discord, and it will just be a couple of weeks from NBA being back, where the daily voice chats that I'll be in and the daily NBA spreadsheets, all that stuff, the grind really kicks up, and when that comes back, so will the VIP prices. So if you guys just want to get in, hang out with the boys, we'd love to have you, and girls, we'd love to have you at rundfs.com. So check that out. We do have the 2021 Year Pass available and the early bird MVP package. This will likely be gone within a week or so. For those of you that know you're going to be locked in for the whole NBA season, you guys can go ahead and get that and then get the rest of this year kind of baked in. That will not be up there for long. It's kind of just like an early bird / Black Friday thing. So if you guys want to check that out, go to rundfs.com. Come be part of the crew. If you have anything else for me, twitter.com/gundackersports. That's the way you can link up with me on Twitter. DMs are open. I'm going to try to make this video 30 minutes or less. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to try. So, Gun, keep it quick, keep it simple. Tennessee Titans at the Indianapolis Colts. We got a 49.5 total when it opened. It's moved to 51.5, and the Colts went from 3.5 point favorites to minus 3 point favorites. Jonathan Taylor has been put on the COVID restricted list, opening an opportunity, knock on wood, for Nyheim Hines to curtain call his massive performance against these Titans just 2 weeks ago, where he dropped 28.5 fantasy points on a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown. Yes, Jordan Wilkins exists. Do we think Jordan Wilkins will just kind of go 50-50 here? I would say it's at least a possibility, but I'm going to at least presume for now that Nyheim Hines might be the 70-30 and lean on the 70 side. The rest of the Colts really spread out in terms of usage. Phillip Rivers, we'll look at T.Y. Hilton, Zach Pascal, Michael Pittman, all those guys kind of average right around 5 targets per game, which is kind of what Nyheim Hines does. So at running back, if I'm going to take a shot here, hope the Colts get in the end zone and hope Nyheim Hines gets peppered with 5-6 targets. I'm going to go after him at 4,600. He's probably going to be the only piece of exposure that I'm overly enticed by in this game, and I think the ownership projection on him is pretty high up there. If we look at the DraftKings projection tab here, if I type Hines is, let me sort it by most projected right now. Got Nyheim Hines at 18%. That might even move up further as we get closer to lock. So certainly don't think Hines is going to be a secret, but I do kind of like him as one of my only pieces from this game. I don't think any other Colt kind of gets there for me in terms of my own personal player pool. The Titans are a little bit more intriguing. Derrick Henry last week, his stat line is nice, right? 28 carries, 133 yards, and a walk-off touchdown. It took overtime to get him there, and it was still kind of a 23 fantasy points, cool. Nothing to go out of your way to roster at 8K. So I'm kind of hoping that he's somewhat limited here again against the Colts just 2 weeks ago. He still broke the century mark, didn't get in the end zone. The Colts defense has been top 10 in both DVOA against the pass and the run, even closer to top 5. So it's not a matchup that I'm especially in love with. I think A.J. Brown is a curious click for me at 6,700, but I feel like the price might kind of push me out of my comfort zone on him as well. well. So I don't see myself having exposure to any of the Titans here. That may be a mistake because they are one of the higher implied totals. I think on the slate, like 24.25. Not something that I need to have every bit of, but they are enough to have equity in 3 touchdowns, and you would assume, Henry has a shot at 1, and then, maybe like Corey Davis or somebody else can float in past an A.J. Brown. And even Corey Davis had 11 last time, and then let me pull up Jonnu Smith against the Colts. He dropped 9.5. So there's just not a whole lot that I'm loving here from the Titans side. So I'm going to try and keep my pool as tight as possible, 20 or less line, single entry, stuff like that. So in this game, I might just have Nyheim Hines, and that might be it. Moving on to the next game, Arizona Cardinals and the New England Patriots. We have a game total sitting at 49. It opened at 48, so still a sub 50. And the Cardinals went from -3 to -1. Patriots on paper, statistically and record-wise, haven't been world shakers, but you still got to give Bill Belichick some respect when you go into Foxborough, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing here in the lines. I think when you look at the pricing on this slate and how it shakes out, the Cardinals, when it comes to their top guy, in DeAndre Hopkins at 8,100, it's really hard to compare that to Keenan Allen in a great spot, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs in a high usage spot, and say that, yeah, he's by far the best option. Sure, he's projected to be involved for the most part, but when it comes to like tournament winning performances, there's that Hail Mary catch that really put him over the mark a couple weeks ago, but there's not a lot of high leverage consistency, and he does not have a great track record against Bill Belichick. Belichick has schemed really well against him in the last couple games against the Patriots. And again, it's a different Patriots team, but still a defense that is coached the same, schemed the same, and a lot of the same defensive personnel. Last game, 5 catches, 64 yards. Previously, 8 for 78. 7 for 76, 6 for 65, 4 for 56, 3 for 52, 2 for 77. No touchdowns there. So, a couple of those games that help move the chains, but in terms of getting you to the top of tournaments, there hasn't been anything extraordinary there. We know Belichick does have a knack for kind of containing your number one weapon, Larry Fitzgerald, out for this game. So I'm probably going to go ahead and avoid DeAndre Hopkins. I still think Kyler Murray is somebody that I can run naked here at 8,200. I don't think there's a must-have handcuff. We'll talk about Andy Isabella in a second, but one of the reasons I do like Murray is because he can run the ball and he rushes for a lot of touchdowns. So we might have to do that a little bit more if Hopkins can be contained yet again. So Murray naked in the player pool, sure. I won't have any high-owned combinations where I'm forcing a handcuff to him. I do want to talk about Andy Isabella. He is generating a little bit of steam here for the Cardinals. Larry Fitzgerald has been ruled out. Isabella's another guy that can kind of pick up some time there in the slot. He's already getting a target or two a game right now. If he picks up Fitzgerald's targets, 5 or 6 targets, and if DeAndre Hopkins gets kind of neutralized, there's a chance that $3K for Isabella kind of pays off. Mac on Twitter last night wanted to remind me that he went to college in the Boston area, so a little bit of narrative there as well. I think early on we're seeing some decent projections for Isabella in terms of ownership. At $3K, it's one of the lowest risk moves that you can make, and it will help you fill out a lineup. So Isabella, I think, will be chalky. But it seems like a decent floor risk reward play, considering that he's going to be in the slot, and there's some stuff going his way in terms of maybe Nuke is getting somewhat contained. On the Patriots side, what do we think about Jacoby Myers bouncing back here? 5,300 last week. His targets kind of fell by the wayside in a game against the Texans that went a little bit different than expected. But we can't just ignore the fact that he had been seeing 24, 25% target share even more so, I mean, you look at if you isolate the 3 weeks prior, 10, 14 targets. So I do like having goldfish memory here and thinking that Jacoby Myers has a shot at 20 fantasy points. So he'll be in my pool. I think I have him as a tier 3 right now, and where he falls, he falls. And then Cam Newton, you pretty much know what you're going to get out of him. Not a whole lot of passing touchdown equity, just 4 passing touchdowns on the season, but he's going to rush for a lot when he gets into the red zone. The Patriots are one of the higher run ratio teams in football, running at a 52.2% clip. That's 3rd highest on the season. So a lot of that is Cam Newton, but when they get into the red zone, there's not a whole lot of touchdown equity for the receivers based on what we have so far. So I'm not going to be overly enthralled by having exposure to the Patriots, maybe a share of Jacoby, something like that. I don't see myself game stack or group stacking either side. Just running a little bit of naked Kyler, a little bit of Isabella, maybe even handcuff that to Kyler where I need to because he is 3K, and then maybe some in mass entry, some shares of like Cam and Jacoby. Moving on to Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's another game that I'm finding myself not having a ton of. This total opened at 46.5. It did move up a safety to 48.5. The Browns minus 7.5 point favorites. The Jaguars quarterback situation got a little funky as Doug Marrone confirmed that Mike Glennon is going to be the starting quarterback for this game. He's 4,600 on DraftKings, but he's an elder statesman of the league, and there's not a whole lot to be excited about when it comes to him. And then when the Cleveland Browns have both Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb healthy, obviously Odell on the sideline, this is a team that will run the ball, and when they're done running the ball, they'll run some more. They're averaging under 30 pass attempts per game on the season at 28, and they're just going to run the ball. And we've seen games where Nick Chubb and Hunt, have 18 carries each. It's hard to land on one of those guys with a high level of confidence, knowing that each could vulture the other. But at their prices, I think you can make tournament cases. 7,100 for Nick Chubb. Could he get you that 20 fantasy points? And then Kareem Hunt has been more so used in the goal line in the last 2 weeks, which I don't know if that's going to be sustainable long term or the plan long term. But he has been a guy that they look to, in the red zone, and Chubb kind of been used a little bit more between the 20s. But at 5,600, if he landed to 2 touchdowns, he could probably be a solid play. So I think individually you can make cases for them in tournaments, but I don't think in single entry, 3 entry, or definitely not cash games I land on either one of them. I don't see myself getting to the pass game for the Browns. The Jaguars, I disagreed with the initial ownership projection on James Robinson in terms of if he was that owned. I think I saw him at 20% at one point. I was like, if he's at 20%, it doesn't make sense to me because the game script is just very anti running back, right? If you're a 7-point underdog, 7.5 point underdog, that's not really the game script that you would paint favorably for a running back to be involved. The caveat here is, could he get some more targets? Maybe. Will Mike Glennon be somebody that we expect to check down a lot? That remains to be seen with this skill set of offense, but it's just not something that I'm falling in love with. Could James Robinson get you 20-plus fantasy points? There's not a whole lot here that makes me believe that I'm going to lock that in. So I probably don't have any James Robinson when it's all said and done. And I'm probably going to be lower on the Jaguars than I want to be. But the receiving core does present opportunities for some value to hit. DJ Chark is out this week with a rib injury. And Chris Conley is also out. And that's going to open up, all the opportunity here, even though we expect, the time possession or really just this game to drag on because of how much that the Browns run the ball. It's going to open up chances for some 3K guys, right? Chip in a chair, 3,600 for Keelan Cole, 5-7 targets the last 2 weeks. Saw 21 against Green Bay, different quarterback driving the ship there. Laviska Shenault, could he get a couple targets at 3K? Sure. Basically, if these 3K guys can get me 10 plus in a single entry or in cash games, I feel like it was worth it. So is it worth it? I think, some shares of them, sure. I think there's a pretty, I don't want to say stout mix of 3K options. I'll say there's several 3K receiving options that are completely justifiable theory-wise. And we talked about Andy Isabella being one of them. And I think these guys are the same. So if I'm scripting 20 lineups and I got all these guys in a mix and I don't know which one specifically that I want, I probably just throw them all on the board and cap them at 20-25% each. That way I can still probably get the parameters of my core players, my tier ones and whatever that I want the optimizer to give me without having a high stake in a specific 3K punt receiver. But it does seem like Andy Isabella is going to be the go-to guy for not just the Phil, but probably me as well. But with that said, there's not a whole lot here that I'm going to... I probably don't have any of this game in short entry. I do think the Browns defense has a case at 3,100, but there's stronger cases for near defenses like the Giants and stuff like that. But we got 20 points out of the Browns defense last week. Of course, that was the turnover-prone Carson Wentz finally blowing up game. But against Mike Glennon, hey, all bets are off when you're 7.5-point favorite. So I do have the Browns defense in my player pool. Moving on to the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets. We have two different quarterbacks today than we did last week, at least starting the game. The total for this game opened at 46.5. It's moved down to 44.5. Dolphins are a 7.5-point favorite. Ryan Fitzpatrick will be under center for the Dolphins again, as Tua is going to kind of sit this one out. Fitz came into the end of the game last week against the Denver Broncos. But prior to that, he wasn't a quarterback that was benched due to poor performance. He was more so benched for the Dolphins to kind of see what they had in their big draft pick Tua, right? Well, before he got benched for Tua, I mean, this guy was consistent as a cucumber. 30 fantasy points, 26, 25, 27, just getting it done. At New England, opening week, Foxborough, when Bill Belichick has the whole offseason to prepare for you. I don't need to overthink that one. And then the Jets, he didn't do well against the Jets in terms of tournament ceiling, 18 fantasy points. He didn't need to do well. His team pitched the shutout, 24-zip. So this is still going to be a run-first Dolphins team, you would think on paper. But the run personnel of the Dolphins is a lot different now than it was even the last time they played the Jets. Look at this Dolphins running back situation. Myles Gaskin will not play in this game. Salvin Ahmed will not play in this game after kind of picking up the workhorse duties the last couple weeks. And we know that they've moved on from guys like Jordan Howard. So it's looking like Matt Breida has a chance to be the workhorse back. And then past him, all bets are off. So against the Jets, is there a case that Ryan Fitzpatrick has to throw the ball a little bit more? Yes. And is there a case that we can take advantage of this price, $5,500? Again, my answer is yes. I mean, this is a guy that was consistently paying him off. I have a really, really strong decision to make on whether or not I want Fitzpatrick in my cash and single entry. And the reason I say that is because he's so cheap. He can return decent value on that price point, and it still gives me enough play money to get my core. My core today, my tier ones, you guys can see my whole player pool in the rundfs.com VIP spreadsheet guns player pool tab. But I want as much Dalvin Cook, Keenan Allen, and Darren Waller as I can possibly get. And I don't know that getting them with a quarterback like Justin Herbert or somebody like that is going to be extremely viable and still like the rest of my lineup. So I'm really, really considering Ryan Fitzpatrick here. And if I was going to look at this Dolphins receiving core, he does have some options, and it might even be a little bit more concentrated this week than even earlier in the season. Preston Williams is on the IR. Jakeem Grant banged up if he does play. He's officially questionable, and he was added on Thursday. So being a late addition to the injury report is, something that I would probably consider you closer to out or decoy or even limited. So could this be Devontae Parker under 6K? Could we get 6 to 10 targets here? I think it's very, very possible, and we've seen him have some strong games with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Devontae Parker, DKP by game log with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Let's go last 10 games. Just kind of see what the range of outcomes are here. 18, 6, 13, 24, 11, 16. So you see a wide range of outcomes. You go deeper into last season. He was hitting 20 pluses. I don't think that I have to force the Devontae Parker handcuff here, but I certainly think it's very viable, and it's an attractive piece to put with Fitzpatrick if I feel like I have to. But I also don't mind running Fitzpatrick by himself. Mike Gesicki's also somebody that you can throw in the mix. I think tight end is as deeper on the top end as it's been in a while with Travis Kelce and Darren Waller. So I probably don't end up with a lot of Mike Gesicki at the end of the day. I may not end up with any just because of what I want to do with my tight end spot, but it's another option for Fitzpatrick to have. Now, looking on the Jets side, they also have a change, so to speak, at quarterback. Joe Flacco's been driving the ship the last couple weeks, and it's not been pretty. And I think now that Sam Darnold's back, I don't think it gets much better. But if you look at week 8 and beyond, 8, 7, 4, 3. One of the things that I think is really curious about Sam Darnold's return for me in terms of my roster construction is Jamison Crowder, 5,400. Talked about when Darnold was in the mix. The same search we just did for Parker with Fitz, I'm going to do it with Crowder. Jamison Crowder, DKP by game log with Sam Darnold. Crowder's been a guy that we've seen get 10-plus targets consistently with Sam Darnold, who just peppers that slot receiver position. And I think Crowder could be that guy today in PPR. Let's go last 10 games on that search. So I'm very, very curious. You look at the last 10 games here, 20, 27, 20, 27, 18, 19. Sure, there's some absolute no-floor bust games against Miami, at Cincy. Like, there's certainly range of outcomes for failure, but even in those games that he busted, 7 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets against Pittsburgh. There's only one game here. That's against Oakland, and he only had 4 targets. And some of these games might not have enough context, right? Is there an injury or something like that? Maybe. But essentially what I'm just trying to paint here is, like, Darnold will look at Jamison Crowder. There is some built-in history, some built-in chemistry. And I think Crowder at 5,400 is going to make more lineups of mine today than maybe I should. But, man, it just makes so much sense for me. So there are some individual pieces from this game I definitely like, those being Devontae Parker versus Jamison Crowder and even Ryan Fitzpatrick. Let's move on to the next game, the Raiders and the Falcons. So we go pull up the Vegas tab on this one. We've got 56 point totals when it opened, or is what it opened at. It's moved to 54. We have 28 in the hook implied total for the Raiders, 25.5 for the Falcons. So plenty of implied points to be had here. It's in a dome, and I think when it comes to the Raiders, there's one guy that just stands out to me, and that's Darren Waller. Darren Waller, I'd almost argue I would pay AK as a receiver today for Darren Waller. He's 6K. He's been the target monster for the Raiders. And it's the matchup of the century. Let me paint a couple pictures here. Let's go to weekly target tab in the rundfs.com VIP spreadsheet. Pull up Las Vegas. Darren Waller leads them with 8.4 targets per game. Now let's go look at defense versus position. If I go to fantasy points allowed per game to opposing tight ends, the Falcons allow the most fantasy points per game to tight ends. They've allowed 622 yards receiving. That is the second most in the NFL, and they've allowed 8 touchdowns and a 83.8% reception rate, catch percentage, to opposing tight ends. That is dangerous. This could be a career game for Darren Waller in a spot that is just made for him. And one of the tournament spins that I think about when I look at ownership projections for this game is everyone, not everyone, but there's a high ownership projection for Josh Jacobs, and rightfully so. You think about the 28 points potentially for the Raiders. There's plenty of touchdown equity to kind of give some of that to Josh Jacobs. But man, Josh Jacobs has been in similar spots in previous weeks where he's going against porous defenses, and his team's projected to put up some points. And he's just an average 20-ish fantasy point guy. So while I will have Josh Jacobs here, I do think the field is kind of out leveraging themselves because and John Gruden, he doesn't like to stray away from the run first game plan that he has. I get it, but man, how obvious in retrospect would it be if Darren Waller linked up with if Derek Carr linked up with Darren Waller 3 times in the end zone, and we were like, man, why don't we have Derek Carr in the mix? Because right as we talk about how bad the Falcons have been against the tight end position, the Falcons give up the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks as well. Even Taysom Hill, I know it took some rushing touchdowns last week, but by hook or by crook, it's been just kind of true all season. 22 passing touchdowns allowed, 6 rushing touchdowns. It just makes a whole lot of sense to love a Derek Carr, Darren Waller handcuff in tournaments. I do think in group stacks, I'll also have some Waller, Carr, and Josh Jacobs 3-man stacks. But I just love the idea of a potential Derek Carr to Darren Waller multi-touchdown day with 100-plus receiving yards for Darren Waller. So I love that a lot. Past Waller, I don't love any of the Raiders pass catchers, but if recency bias is a thing, Nelson Aguilar's in the mix, sure. But man, is this just like a spin the wheel, make a deal when it comes to secondary guys. Henry Ruggs, 1 to 4 targets a game. Hunter Renfrow, you get it. It's just not much to love here. It's kind of even more diverse Colts receiving core situation when it comes to targets per game. So that's where I'm at on that. Let's look over on the other side here. Atlanta Falcons. Todd Gurley out. He's 5,500. If you look at what he's been doing, especially since they've moved on from Dan Quinn, they've tried to run as much as they possibly can. We've seen games 19, 18, 23 carries in neutral game scripts with the new coach. Will that be their plan here with Brian Hill? Brian Hill has one of the higher ownership projections on the week as well. And that's one of those spots where I think I have to make a decision for myself. Do I want to jump on that? And I think right now I'm leaning towards no. Brian Hill is so cheap. He doesn't need to do a whole lot to feel like you got 3-4x from the deal. But man, it's not like Todd Gurley's out here blowing up the scoreboard, right? There's a couple of really strong games, 28 against Carolina. Well, we would love 22, and that's against the Detroit Lions that I think is the worst run defense. Them and the Texans are kind of neck and neck in terms of being the worst run defense. He just had a lot of touchdowns there. And then it's easy to look at the Raiders and know that they allow a whole lot of fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. They allow the 4th most. But a lot of this is really touchdown variance. They've allowed 12 touchdowns on the ground, 2 in the air to opposing running backs. So is there a range of outcomes where Brian Hill, just is an average 10 fantasy point guy? Is there a range of outcomes where they get in the red zone and, I don't know, Ito Smith vultures a touchdown or something like that? For me, yes. So I think I'm a little less. There's a chance in my 20 lineups I might just eliminate Brian Hill just to try and give myself some built-in leverage. Just because I'm fairly confident in saying 100 out of 100 times I kind of want Nyheim Hines over Brian Hill just because I have some type of solidification on what he can do. And then I thought about this earlier. Todd Gurley's average fantasy points per game this season is 14. if Brian Hill scores 14 fantasy points today, he's not necessarily guaranteed to win you a tournament. So even at 4K, I can live without him if he dropped 14. So that's kind of where I'm at on Brian Hill. The receiving situation gets a little funky here. Julio Jones is a true game time decision. They're expected to test him out before the game starts. What else is new when it comes to Julio? But I think with or without Julio, Calvin Ridley's definitely in play at 7,100. If Julio's in, even at decoy status, Ridley can see a few more looks from Matt Ryan. Russell Gage kind of emerges, but so does Zacchaeus here. He's had a couple strong games this season without Julio. He can fill in. We saw a 16 from him, so you kind of add him to the mix of 3K punt receivers that would be viable. I would say, no matter depending on what time you listen to this video, just think about it before the new. Like if Julio news came out 40 minutes before tip off. Don't run to swap to the value backup here, knowing that Indy Isabella and guys like that exist. Just kind of think about it now. If you're listening to this 4 or 5 hours before tip off, just kind of know what you would want to do. I would probably diversify a little bit more, but I still think Isabella would kind of get the needle till for me. It would also maybe look like another couple passes for Hayden Hurst. He is expected to play despite this Q tag on him. But again, I think tight end's kind of spoken for me personally today. Let's talk about Matt Ryan for just a second. He's 5,900. This is a team that we've seen Matt Ryan throw 40-plus pass attempts a game. Of course, that was under different management. But the last couple of weeks have been a little bit more neutral games. And this is a game that's projected to put up 50-plus points. If they can't get it going on the ground, right, no Todd Gurley, if Brian Hill's just not cutting the mustard, is there a range of outcome where Matt Ryan has to keep the ball in the air and has to look at Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, even Julio Jones if he ended up playing? And could Matt Ryan just kind of sneak through and give us one of those 28, 27-point games? I think it's very possible. I don't think he's going to make my player pool when it's all said and done. It's just a range of outcome that I wanted to explore out loud. Let's move on. New York Giants and the Cincinnati Bengals. I really got to cut some time here, so I'll make it really, really, really fast, cheap, simple. This is a 44.5-point game total. Giants are favored by 4.5. Bengals and that horrible offensive line. We kind of expected it to come sooner or later. Joe Burrow goes down. And they're leaning on Ryan Finley now. Ryan Finley has not looked good, and he did not look good against Washington. Completed just 3 of 10 passes and threw an interception to boot. This is really going to hurt my perspective and outlook on the Bengals offense. Gio Bernard is questionable with a concussion. I don't know if he's closer to in or out right now, and I just don't trust this offense to get it done. And that offensive line is so banged up that the Giants could just fall into a couple of sacks and whatnot just based on the matchup. Offensively, I'm not leaning on too many of the Giants players except Wayne Gallman, who in the last couple weeks have seen 18, 14, 12 carries. If you're going to get double-digit carries and a shot at end zone work, he's had a touchdown in 4 games straight, double touchdowns last week in tougher matchups going against this Bengals team. I like his propensity to pay off 5K, so I like a Gallman Giants defense correlation, and that's kind of where I'm at on this game, and I'm not going to go too crazy elsewhere. Keeping it moving, the Chargers and the Buffalo Bills. This game projects to be one of the higher scoring games on the slate. We've got a 52-point total, 4.5-point spread in favor of the Bills. We got news yesterday that the Chargers activated Austin Eckler. He was dealing with a hamstring injury. I was able to listen to a little bit about Eckler's injuries, kind of gauge what I think they'll do with him. And I have no idea what they'll do with him. And one of the reasons why I have no idea what they'll do with him is because Kalen Ballage is questionable. We've even seen him listed as doubtful from an Adam Schefter report that said he isn't expected to play. Do you lean on Austin Eckler a lot in his return? I think it's possible, but even then, could 15 touches be worth some shares of at 6,100, knowing that half of those touches could be targets in PPR format? I'm struggling. He's probably the guy that I'm struggling the most with on this slate so far to figure out what I really, really, really want to do with. So right now, I think I have him as a tier 3. Moving on, Keenan Allen. He's one of my tier 1 plays of the day. 19 targets against the New York Jets. He's going against a Buffalo Bills that has just absolutely been carved up by high usage slot receivers throughout the season. Surely every defense will key in on Keenan Allen as much as possible, but it just has not slowed down Herbert to Keenan at all this year. And I'm just not going to stay away from the volume and the opportunity, especially considering the total for this game. So Keenan Allen, my top receiver on the slate. He'll be my highest owned. Pretty self-explanatory. Where I can get him, I'll try and handcuff him to Herbert. But because of my enthrallment with trying to get Dalvin Cook, Keenan Allen, and Darren Waller in lineups together, I'm falling into more of the 5K quarterback area, Ryan Fitzpatrick types. But Herbert, he makes sense. I do think that there's a chance that this game maybe underwhelms. It's a West Coast team traveling to the East Coast. I think it's 40, 50 degrees, so it's not like a strong weather game. But there is certainly some stuff going in the favor of maybe the under or the underwhelmment here. But because of how concentrated the usage is, especially for Keenan Allen, I'm not going to overthink that. On the Buffalo Bills side, Josh Allen, 7,600, just kind of right there. All those 7, 8K quarterbacks, the obvious ones, they just have a range of outcomes where they can all get there. So I'm just going to have exposure in the group stacks that I run. The 2 receivers I'm eyeing the most, Stephon Diggs, 7,600. He's likely to see double-digit targets. Because I'll have more Keenan Allen, I likely don't get to that much Stephon Diggs. I will try and have some lineups that run Diggs at Allen, but that will likely cost me a Dalvin Cook or a Darren Waller, or just give me a lot of really, really cheap, 4K running backs, 3K receivers, something like that. So it's a give-and-take situation there. Stephon Diggs will not have John Brown on the other side to kind of open it up a little bit for him. Not that that's going to deter Josh Allen from looking at Diggs, but John Brown, I think, is a force that defenses know can take the top off. Cole Beasley at 5,500. I like him, another slot receiver that can pound up targets. 13 targets for him against Arizona. And then 12 targets against the Jets. His targets per game can definitely fluctuate and be a little bit frustrating, but he has tournament-winning ceiling. He's done it twice in the last 4 games, so I wouldn't have 50% of him on that scale, or he wins 50% of the time. But I do think, considering that John Brown is out, and this game total, there's plenty of reason to suggest that Cole Beasley can get involved quick, fast, in a hurry, and hopefully PPR his way to a strong day at 5,500, man. I do think 18 fantasy points at 8 to 12 targets is a reasonable range of outcome. Gabrielle Davis is a name a lot of people are looking at as one of those 3K receivers to throw in the mix. Without John Brown, he's likely the guy that's going to take over a lot of his routes and snaps. A couple of games already, we've seen 3-5 targets, and that's kind of what John Brown, 4 or 5 targets, and hopefully he breaks one. So again, he's just a 3K receiver. Am I going to jam it in and hang my day on him? Probably not, but he's in the mix. Again, Andy Isabella so far kind of leading the charge when it comes to all that. I'm not going to have any Bills running backs. Panthers and the Vikings, keeping this one really, really simple. If we look at the total over in that Fantasy Labs Vegas total page, Vikings. There it is. We got a 50 game total here. 26.5 implied total for the Vikings. 23.5 for the Panthers. Adam Thielen's out. Thielen, one of the biggest impact players when it comes to the Vikings, or the biggest impact player when it comes to the Vikings passing offense. His absence is going to generate a lot of ownership to Justin Jefferson at 6,300. I will say Jefferson has had some great games fantasy-wise without Thielen. Has had some great games fantasy-wise with Thielen. But it's a little bit different being opposite Adam Thielen versus being the number one target of a defense. So I do think there's a range of outcomes where Jefferson's an average play, but at 6,300, I'm willing to put him in my tier two player pool when it comes to receivers, which means I'll likely have between 20 to 35% of them. Kyle Rudolph, another guy I like here. Irv Smith Jr. out. and Thielen's out, so Kyle Rudolph could stand to benefit from a couple extra targets, unlike the aforementioned Darren Waller and Travis Kelce. Rudolph's 2,800, so it doesn't have to do a whole lot. We've seen a lot of punting tight end position kind of get there. If you look at the tight end defense versus position tab in a RunDFS.com NFL VIP spreadsheet, the Panthers, if we control F it, have been kind of a league average matchup when it comes to fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. But they have allowed 58 receptions, 619 receiving yards on 87 targets. So the catch rate is average, but it has been a spot where they've allowed amongst the highest receptions. So Kyle Rudolph doesn't need but 5-6 targets and a touchdown to kind of pay off 2,800. If you want to build some lineups where you don't have to pay up at tight end, I think Kyle Rudolph will end up being one of the more trendier cheap tight ends, if not the trendiest cheap tight end. The Panthers. Oh, and Dalvin Cook. All right, you don't need me to tell you to play Dalvin Cook. $9,500. If you guys can get there, get there. He should be this team's success or failure. The Panthers are being. Looks like they're right around league average too so far this season when it comes to fantasy points. No, they're not. I missed that. They're allowing over 21 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. So that's top 7-ish allowed, 10 touchdowns on the season. Dalvin Cook's just a different beast. He's at home. No elements to worry about. Without Adam Thielen, certainly could see 25, 30 carries, a couple targets. Just should have the highest touch rate on the slate pre-flop. So Adam Thielen in cash games, in single entries and mass field, like Thielen will be one of my 3 tier 3s as it stands right now. 9,500. I'm just going to pay it. Whatever happens, happens. Do we run it back with any of these Panthers? Mike Davis, man, 6,900. I think I'm out this week. But the touches have been there. 20 touches last week. Tampa Bay, I was never on that because of the matchup in terms of him, being a slate breaker. But against the Vikings, man, if he picks up some more of these targets, sure. It is a coming home game, I guess you could say, for Teddy Bridgewater. I think Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore both have very viable cases, 62, 6,100. Target shares fine for them. It's just a matter of them converting. So if you want to run them back at a Dalvin Cook, I certainly think that's positive correlation. I'm not playing either quarterback here. Moving on, the Saints and the Denver Broncos. This game got really, really, really weird yesterday. I'm going to show you guys something that I don't know if I've ever seen in my lifetime. The Broncos have an implied total of 11 points. All of their active quarterbacks were disqualified from playing due to COVID restrictions. Drew Lock, Ripien, and Jeff Driscoll all will not be able to be with the team here. So the Broncos are going to have to lean on a practice squad quarterback. And then I've seen reports that the backup quarterback might be Royce Freeman. So the Broncos are in just a nightmare situation to be in, not having a single piece of Denver Bronco offense. I do think I'm not that stoked on the Saints offense either. I think they should dominate this game. They're 15-point favorites. I could even see a case where Latavius Murray gets a lot of second half a run and even further so. So I'm probably just gonna not have pieces from this game. Logistically, you can make the case for the Saints defense at 3,800. What I'll say to that is, if you guys ever played hockey DFS, goalies would get points for defending shots on goals, right? So you kind of want to find the balance of a goalie versus a offense that's going to take plenty of shots, because that's how he's going to make his points. It's kind of the same for defense. Defense is really going to make or break your tournaments by touchdowns, pick sixes, stuff like that. Denver is not in a spot to throw the ball a whole lot here. So could we see Denver throwing the ball under 25 times, 20 times? So I think there is a range of outcome that, maybe the Saints don't have enough opportunity to really bake in for a lot of touchdown equity. But they have had 2 or more interceptions in 3 games straight. But these are against teams that throw the ball a little bit more. So I'm definitely going to play the Saints, but at 3,800, near 4K, if I need some salary savings, I can definitely err to the side of a lesser defense just because of how volatile and how high variant the defense position is for fantasy. Moving on, the 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. I only have one piece for this game. Overall, though, this is a game total of 44.5, and the Rams are 6.5 point favorites. So I'm not going to dabble with the running backs or anything from this game. I do think Cooper Kupp is worth a click in just activating him in your optimizer, and if he hits 13, 7, 20 targets this last couple weeks. Certainly seems like you would need a more neutral game script here, but nothing that I love or I'm going to go out of my way to roster. Then we have one game left on the docket. Take a pause for the cause and let you guys know that one, I failed at getting this video under 30 minutes, and two, if you guys want to get access to my projections, player pool, stuff like that, you can do so with a RunDFS.com subscription at RunDFS.com. Click VIP passes, find a couple of options. Definitely the time of year to get loaded up on the year passes for 2021 and the MVP packages. These will only be there for the next week or so. The year pass will probably be there through the end of December. But if you guys want to lock into the full season of NBA, you can do so with this early bird MVP package. $400 gets you the rest of NFL. It's going to get you all of NBA, a good chunk of the beginning of baseball, pending they start in April. And even we have some NASCAR covers in the meantime, and that includes daily spreadsheets and daily voice chats in the RunDFS.com Discord. Also, we'll have some coaching sessions that you guys can purchase as an extra if you guys didn't have VIP, or we might even have some passes with that built in. So if you guys are interested in that, keep an eye on that. Keep an eye out on that. Twitter.com/GundeckerSports. I'll kind of keep everyone's ear to the ground. Last game, the Chiefs and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's a lot to love here. There's only 3 games on the afternoon slate. And being that I don't love the Saints, Denver, Niners, Rams game, and this game could be pretty hard to predict, there's a good chance I play a majority of my money on the early slate just to not have to deal with this game. But at the same time, you'll see a lot of ownership in this game and maybe find some opportunities to leverage. I'll be really, really quick at this one. The Chiefs have an implied total of 30 points. The Bucs are at 26.5. 3.5 point favorites are the Chiefs. 56.5 point game total. There's plenty of reason to kind of expect a lot of real points from this game, and there's also some arguments that you can make against it. The Buccaneers defensively, DVOA wise, have been number 1 against the run and number 1 against the pass. But the Chiefs' offense, we know, is dynamic, it's generational, and I don't know that any defense in the league is set up to stop what the Chiefs have in Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, and even Sammy Watkins. So my only argument here is like maybe they're all priced at a point where they just become average plays against a elite defense. But even then, like I'm not going to talk you off of any of these guys individually. So play them where you want to play them. And then Tampa, I think, is a little bit more wide range of outcomes. Tom Brady has been Jekyll and Hyde. We've seen some strong games from him. And we've seen some bad games, right? The last 4 weeks, even the last 3 weeks, kind of tell the story. 2 interceptions and 2 touchdowns last week. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions against the Panthers, a much more porous defense. And then 3 turnovers against the Saints. So you just don't know what you're going to get from him. But nobody on paper has, I want to say nobody, but Tom Brady does just have some incredible weapons on paper, especially to throw to. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, all guys that have a similar range of outcomes if we look at the last 3 weeks of sample size. They're all cheap enough, obtainable, 5,700 to 6,100. All of them seem like they can get you a strong shot at 15 to 20 fantasy points. Obviously, Gronk, Brate, guys like that are in the mix as well. So this is a really hard game in terms of predictive value because it could just go so many different ways. The Chiefs could kind of be average for their price points, and then the Buccaneers offense could do anything from completely fall on its face to kind of go blow for blow with the Chiefs. So I do think I'm going to end up playing a lot more early only. But we'll see how that shakes up. Anyway, that is our day of look at today's slate for DraftKings. All of that kind of applies for FanDuel as well. I'm not going to put out my whole lineup here, but I will say my core here is going to be Dalvin Cook, Keenan Allen, and Darren Waller. And I'm going to start from there and go on. Likely see me run some value on Gallman, maybe Giants D and Naheem Hines to get you started. And then Andy Isabella, somebody I can throw in the mix as a 3K guy that makes a whole lot of sense. And that's going to give me 46 per. So throw in a defense, try and get up to a little bit of money for a quarterback. And you guys can kind of see where I'm going to be pushing towards in a lot of my 20 entry lineups, man. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today on YouTube. I'm sorry this video went longer, but you guys know how I do, man. I try and speak my mind. So I'll see you guys, hopefully something else for next week. Otherwise, twitter.com/GunDeckerSports. And I'm always on Twitch playing Fortnite. If you ever just want to hang out, twitch.tv/GunDecker99. I love each and every one of you. I hope you guys crush it. Show me them screenshots tonight. Good luck. God bless. And go win some money.